is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts, Dylan and Ryan. And today, we're going to talk about the head coaching search once again, but this time, because there's actually some substance behind this, Jason Kidd. It seems like that, after kind of a week of reports of, it doesn't seem like they're going to get him, it seems like that the Mavericks are going to deny him, it seems like the Knicks are really pushing to get Jason Kidd, and there's a recent report also that came out that the two sides are mutually interested. So it seems like this could actually happen, and we want to talk about that in the event that it does, and we want to talk about what we think about Jason Kidd and what we don't like and all that stuff and how we think he might fit with this team. If he does in fact get hired by the Knicks, we poach him from the Mavs. So Ryan, first off, tell me how you're doing, and secondly, what do you think about the recent Jason Kidd reports, about the mutual interest and all that, and if you think that the Knicks are going to end up hiring him as the head coach?
Yeah, so first and foremost, when it comes to Jason Kidd, look, I have actually said on this podcast that I'm kind of happy or fine with the idea of the Dallas Mavericks rejecting the Knicks inquiry on Jason Kidd, that I could do without Jason Kidd as the head coach of the New York Knicks. But I look deeper into the numbers. I look deeper into kind of what the Jason Kidd experience is. And obviously, I have not watched every Dallas Mavericks game. I have not watched enough Maverick games to say I fully understand what it would go like, and that I am, my argument and my analysis is impervious. But Dylan, I really like that with what they had with Luka Doncic, which I think is the kind of offense you would look at to kind of project how the Knicks would look, because the Knicks also have a high usage guard as their number one. Luka Doncic and the Mavericks were a very, 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 very aggressive three-point shooting team. The year that they went to the finals, which was the last full season of Luka and the Mavericks under Jason Kidd, they were second in three-point attempts behind only the Boston Celtics. So they led the Western Conference in three-point attempts. When they acquired Kyrie Irving, I think there was a big question about whether Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic could fit together as two guards who were offense first, ball handlers, primary ball handlers, and Jason Kidd made it work. Now, it's a different scenario with Karl-Anthony Towns and with Jalen Brunson than it is with Kyrie Irving and with Luka Doncic, but I do think that Jason Kidd could figure out a way to make that duo just interact more in terms of on-court presence. And I also think that, unlike with Tom Thibodeau, that Jalen Brunson could be utilized as a decoy in the offense and not just as the guy who takes the ball up the court and has to make everything happen himself. Now, there is a lot of, hey, you're the best player on this team, do it yourself, that goes on in the Jason Kidd offense, because that's the kind of play style that Luka Doncic had. But I do wonder if Jalen Brunson, who does operate a little less, he's not as I need the ball in my hands to make things work as Luka. I'm not saying Luka is bad off ball, but more so that it's Luka Doncic. He's a different caliber of scorer, volume-wise, efficiency-wise, just overall point-per-game output than Jalen Brunson. Luka was averaging 30-plus points a game with Dallas. I think he averaged 33 in his last full season with Dallas. Jalen Brunson's going to average 26-ish with Karl-Anthony Towns. So his usage rates naturally won't be as high. He doesn't need the ball in his hands at all times to make things work. Cat also doesn't need the ball in his hands at all times to make things work. But I also love that the Mavericks were really good defensively. They were a very good defensive team. They ran good defensive sets. They made it work with, again, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. So despite having an incredibly, just something that would make your defense immediately suck, which is trying to play with Kyrie and Luka, they actually excelled defensively. They made it to the finals. The player who I think kind of gives me the most hope here, when I looked at Jason Kidd's offenses and what worked in the playoffs and the regular season, PJ Washington, his transformation, going from a guy who was kind of, just a solid forward with Charlotte to a guy who could exploit the corner three and the catch and shoot opportunities out there. I would love to see how Jason Kidd gets the Knicks off-ball offense working. Way too much standing around in the Knicks offense this year. Way too much. Jalen Brunson has the ball in his hands. Then he passes it off to someone else. Then they drive and dump. They drive and dump, drive and dump, drive and dump. And it's just over and over and over again until someone finds a shot. And that's not really the best way to play against the elite defenses in the NBA. Dylan, I think that by virtue of just how three-point heavy Jason Kidd's offenses tend to be, that alone would be a huge upgrade for the New York Knicks offense.
No, absolutely, and the off-ball movement is huge. I mean, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because under Tom Thibodeau, it was such a one-dimensional, one person running the offense type of show. It was ugly to watch. I'm sorry, it was. Watching Jalen Brunson make a bunch of clutch shots, isolation was the fun part. But when that wasn't happening, which was often, it was ugly. It was ugly to watch, the down the stretch crunch time minutes because you knew it was just going to go in Jalen Brunson's hands, and it was either going to be that Brunson makes this amazing clutch shot, or he turns it over, or he misses it, no one gets the rebound, no one gets back on defense, all that stuff. You want to have efficient and free-flowing offense, especially when you have these 5 players that the Knicks have on the floor at the same time. When you have Brunson, Bridges, Towns, Anunoby, and whoever it's going to be starting, whether it's Josh Hart or someone else in that spot, you want to have a free-flowing offense to where everyone can shoot, everyone can space the floor, everyone can score from all different parts of the court. You don't want it to just be focused around one guy. You have too much talent to be doing that. This isn't like the Detroit Pistons where it's Cade Cunningham and a bunch of vets. No, you have way too much talent to rely on one guy. And I think Jason Kidd could help make that a more free-flowing offense because of the things you mentioned. The 3-point shooting was good. The defense was was also good, making those guys actually hustle on that end of the floor because, I'm not saying Tom Thibodeau wasn't a defensive-minded coach, but it was pretty jarring that for a guy who had a reputation of, coaching good defenses, that the Knicks defense was putrid this past year. I mean, that's pretty jarring if you ask me. I understand, maybe he was misusing the rotations a little bit, and that's why it was, contributing to that, because Karl-Anthony Towns playing the 5 was obviously a horrible experiment. It ended up having to get canned with just, down 0-2 in the Eastern Conference Finals, which was way too late to can that experiment, by the way. It should have been done, honestly, before the end of the regular season, but again, I'm not in control of those decisions. I'm just here to speak my opinion on that. But, looking ahead to Jason Kidd and stuff, again, we don't know for certain if the Knicks are going to hire him. There's no guarantee that, 1, the Mavs even let us interview him, and 2, there's no guarantee that if we do interview him, that the Knicks are going to be like, yes, he's our guy. There's no guarantee. I mean, it seems like they're pretty locked in on him right now, but who knows? They might meet the guy again, they might hear what he's got to say, and they might not like him. They might not like him, and they might want to move on to a different candidate. Now, I envision that, they're really going to see what they can get out of Jason Kidd because it seems like they do really like him, and it seems like that they, have a feel for him a little bit. And he has ties with the organization, too. Jason Kidd played with the Knicks back in, 2012, 2013. He coached Jalen Brunson while Brunson was a Dallas Maverick. So he does have ties to the organization. There's, some good ties there and stuff like that, and I think he could fit well with this team because he's he's not exactly, super young, but he's not like Tom Thibodeau age. He's in his 50s or late 50s, however old he is. So, it's not like you're asking a 80-year-old man to coach a team full of guys under the age of 30. So I think, he would be a solid fit. I do think he'd be a nice, fresher face, and I do think that the Knicks would have some good offense that way. And I think the other added plus is experience. And I know I've said before that coaching experience is a little overrated. I don't think it's necessarily something that has to be the case, but, having a guy who does have head coaching experience and a track record of success as well, as you mentioned, the finals appearance and making the playoffs a couple times while he head coached the Mavericks. Yes, he had Luka Doncic on his team, but still, you made the playoffs and you made it to the finals. Something that Tom Thibodeau could not do was make the finals. So having that track record right there and having that kind of on your resume is always a good look, and it's always something that can always bode well for a team like the Knicks who are ready to make that jump forward to making the finals, especially with what seems to be a wide open Eastern Conference next year. So that's really what I got to say about that. I mean, what I want to hear from you, though, is, let's say the Knicks don't hire Jason Kidd. Let's say they interview him and it goes terribly, or they don't get to interview him at all. Who else could they target? That's what I want to know.
So if the Knicks don't get Jason Kidd, I think that, look, obviously that would go against what the Knicks have or what people have reported is what the Knicks would want, which is Jason Kidd. I still think Johnny Bryant should be someone the Knicks target. I'm sure they have other options on the table. Again, it's been well reported that the Knicks are looking at both the college level and are just are kicking tires anywhere they can. They are going to search throughout the entire coaching landscape, the entire basketball landscape, at the pro level, at the amateur level, at the collegiate level, to try and find someone who fits their identity, what they want their identity to be, and what they believe their players are going to thrive under. Now, Dylan, I will also say this, because this is related a little bit to Jason Kidd. If the Knicks do get Jason Kidd, and you mentioned the familiarity aspect of it, we know that the Dallas Mavericks are going to get Cooper Flagg. I mean, barring some unforeseen development, Cooper Flagg will go number 1 overall. The Dallas Mavericks own the rights to the number 1 overall pick. Do you think that with another power forward in there, Anthony Davis is likely to play the 4 or the 5? Does P.J. Washington become someone who can be available? And given that the Knicks are probably going to look for someone to add to the starting lineup who could play both the power forward and can occasionally get reps at center. I don't want him to play center very much, but is a forward, is someone who shoots and is a pretty solid defensive player. I wonder if maybe the Knicks were also to target someone like a PJ Washington to get alongside a Jason Kidd. So you have both a good head coach you believe fits your scheme, and then a player who excelled in Kidd's scheme, a really good role player, a guy who spaces the floor for you and give you some more size, some more defense. It surrounds Brunson and Cat with three forwards / wings / what do you want to call them, that are versatile defenders, that give you some verticality, they give you length. I mean, I think that might be something that we could see happen. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there, but I do wonder if anyone from Dallas, from a roster perspective, with Cooper Flag coming in, if the Knicks are able to maybe grab one of their key role players as well.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't think about that. I'm glad you brought up PJ Washington because I really didn't think that would possibly even be a thought. I mean, usually when you acquire a head coach from a team, it doesn't happen often, but whenever it does happen, usually it goes for like second round draft capital, nothing much, you exchange that. But usually the players involved at the team don't really get that much involved. It's kind of just like, okay, well, that happened. Now they have to get a new head coach. But as you said, they're going to have Cooper Flag. They're going to have Anthony Davis. So PJ Washington's starting spot is gone. That's gone already. I mean, you could just assume that right now. Barring some Nico Harrison masterclass on draft night, Cooper Flag will be their starting small forward or power forward, and Anthony Davis will be right beside him. So, looking ahead to that with PJ Washington, I mean, that would be an interesting target. And, I think that could actually be a solid fit. The one thing I worry about is, of course, just, consistency, and also defense is not the world's best, but, he's a good shooter. He's someone who could give us some spacing, a guy who's active, That would be a nice fit. I think he'd be solid off the bench. I think he'd be a useful wing as well because the Knicks are very much lacking wing depth as it is, and the free agent and trade markets are also lacking in wing depth, so there's not exactly that many options to go to if you want to look for a wing. I have a good feeling that someone like Pacome Dadier is probably going to play a little bit more next year, which I think is a good thing. I do think he has some promise to him, a 6'8", guy who can defend, a guy who's shown he can shoot a little bit too. I think that's a good thing, but I think you also want to get some experienced guys out there as well. You don't want to just trot out a bunch of rookies as your bench, or sophomores I should say. You want to actually get some experienced guys out there who can consistently give you solid performances. And I know I raised the concern about consistency from PJ Washington, and I think it is a valid concern. But if let's say we were to trade for him at a very cheap price because the whole head coaching change in his situation, and the obviously the lineup situation too in Dallas with Cooper Flag there, I would be for it. I mean, if it comes at a cheap price, I would not be opposed to it at all. He's also someone who's versatile enough to play other positions. He can also possibly even slot in as a starter at times of the year if the starting five is struggling again. So, I mean, there's different ways you could go about that. And I think we'll eventually make more episodes about specific free agent targets and specific trade targets. Right now, the big story has, of course, been the head coaching search because, well, we still don't have a head coach, and the NBA draft is about 2 weeks away. So I imagine that within the next 2 weeks, they will have a new head coach. We just don't know who it's going to be. We're kind of saying that it might be Jason Kidd because it seems likely that they're going to at least be able to hopefully get in touch with him. But at the same time, this is the NBA. We've seen that anything could happen at any given time. I mean, nobody had Luka Doncic getting traded. Not many people had Michael Malone getting fired either. So, heck, not even many people had Tom Thibodeau getting fired. So, anything could happen. Who knows? The Mavericks might say, go ahead, talk to Jason Kidd. Go ahead, maybe interview him, see if you want him. Or they could turn around and be like, no, we want to keep him, and then Dallas will lock him up for a big extension and keep him there. So, anything could happen, but at the end of the day, I think what the big thing is, if they can get Jason Kidd, I feel like that can also make this place, New York I'm talking about here, more of an enticing place a little bit. We've seen all the player polls in the past. Tom Thibodeau was not exactly popular amongst NBA players. I mean, when you go back ahead and you look at the guys who played for him, the guys who were currently playing for him or were playing for him this past year, I should say, before he got fired, of course they're going to defend him and say, he's a good coach, all that stuff that the players say is wrong, this, that. But historically, a lot of players have always criticized Tibbs. It's just a true statement. A lot of players have had their reasonable critiques about him and have not been big fans of him. And we saw even in the reports after he got fired, a player on the Knicks who they did not name, which we'll probably never know who it was, but we can speculate a little bit who it was, said that he probably can't play for him again because, it was just the schemes were not going well, the rotations weren't working well, the minutes distribution was terrible. It's a whole bunch of different things. When you get in a head coach who has shown that he can lead a team, a guy who also resonates with the players a little bit more, because that's, I think, is a very important thing. You want to get a coach who can kind of resonate with these guys a little bit and kind of see where they're coming from and make adjustments based on what they're feeling, right? So when you can get someone who can do that, such as Jason Kidd, and I'm not saying Jason Kidd is like some perfect coach. No, he obviously had his tenure in Milwaukee, which went terribly. So we know that he's had his ups and downs in the NBA coaching realm. But at the same time, there's not many good options out there at the moment. Ime Udoka's already been turned down from us. We can't really go after Jay Wright or Rick Pitino. Michael Malone, they're not even considering. A bunch of other names, too, that have been thrown out there that are kind of like there. They're kind of interested, but are they really going to go after him? Probably not. So it seems like that Jason Kidd is the one they're pursuing the most. And you know what? If they hire him, I won't be mad at it. I know I have my pros and cons about it as much as everybody else, but I don't think he would necessarily be like the worst option. If they went after like Mike Brown, for example, I would be a little upset about that one. I'm going to be honest. I would. I'm not saying Mike Brown is this god-awful coach, but I think Jason Kidd is a much better coach than Mike Brown personally. So if they went after Jason Kidd over like him, I would be happy with that. Personally, I want to get your input on that though before we do wrap the episode up, because the coaching market is not exactly the strongest right now, as we can see. And, I want to know if you think Jason Kidd is, like, the guy they should absolutely get, or if it's kind of like someone they should kind of just do, like, a little temperature check on and then kind of move on to somebody else.
Yeah, so I do think that with the coaching search, too, unlike with players, we have data to go, hey, this is what they do, this is how much they shoot, this is how well they shoot, this is how well they defend. We have information and kind of an understanding of how different players who provide certain skill sets fit in certain kinds of lineups. It's kind of hard to figure that out with coaches. How much of it is the players? How much of it is buy-in? There's so much we don't know about an NBA head coach, and there's so much that could be based on just playing for or coaching a team that's very talented, or taking a group that's not that talented and making them look a lot better than they actually are. Some of the greatest debates in sports are related to how impactful a head coach is. Bill Belichick or Tom Brady? Is Steve Kerr a great NBA coach, or is he just a coach of a team that had great players? Eric Spoelstra is someone who I think is universally considered a great coach, but what was that conversation like before he had the finals runs with Jimmy Butler? Was he considered someone who was, LeBron's there, of course they're winning. D. Wade's there, of course they're winning. Chris Bosh is there, of course they're winning. So, Dylan, I do want to point out with the coaching market that it is just hard to figure out who is and who is not a truly good coach. But I do agree that when it comes to Mike Brown, I think the big thing that I worry about is the lack of defensive resume. I do not want the New York Knicks to be a team that is trying to win while having one of the 5 to 10 worst defenses in the NBA. That's why I do find Jason Kidd to be a semi-attractive option. And I do say semi-attractive. I want to also voice some concerns with Jason Kidd because I have not done so this episode. Number one, and I kind of hinted at this earlier, Luka was the highest usage player in the NBA the year that they went to the finals in the regular season. I do not want the Knicks. I would not want Jalen Brunson to try and be Luka Doncic. Not because Luka Doncic is not a player you want to have, but because he's not Luka Doncic. Luka is a once in a decade, once in a generation offensive guard. He's 6'7", he can shoot, he can play make, he can rebound, he can do everything. He draws fouls extremely well. Again, I know Jalen Brunson is a very talented scorer, but he's not Luka. I think that we have to make sure we establish that. Number two, he had Luka and Kyrie. He had 2 elite-level ball handlers. Unless the New York Knicks strike a trade that you and I aren't looking at right now, they're not going to find a second Kyrie-level ball handler. Maybe they find a ball handler to play alongside Jalen Brunson, but that player doesn't exist in the roster right now, and that player sure as hell isn't Kyrie Irving or Kyrie Irving level. So there's that as well. And then I also have concerns. I mean, he's had a lot of headlines throughout his career, both while he was playing and while he's been a head coach. So those are some concerns I have as well. I think that, when we factor all of that in, this isn't a Jason Kidd is the best possible candidate for the New York Knicks. I still believe I'd rather have Johnny Bryant than Jason Kidd as the next head coach of the New York Knicks. But I also think that Jason Kidd would bring a better scheme and a better structure to the New York Knicks. I think he has a better understanding or values a three-point shot a little bit more. And I also don't think the Knicks I don't think Tom Thibodeau is the worst coach in the NBA. I would actually say that Tom Thibodeau at the New York Knicks, even in his last year, was not a bottom 10 coach in the NBA. The Knicks were losing too much because of their schemes in the postseason, but they were still a very good team. And Tibbs had some very good years with the Knicks as well as the head coach. I actually didn't really feel like he had to go until really this past season. So, I think that matters here as well. So it's not like the Knicks need to go and find a superstar coach in order to get to that next level. They just need to find a coach that is good and fits what they have with their roster right now or what the front office wants for their roster in 2025. I will say I think the firing of Tibbs indicates, though, that they want someone for this group, not they want to get a new group for a new head coach. I think it was either this group is going to get shaken up or the head coach is going to go. The head coach went. So I think Cat, is more safe. Hart, maybe not so much, but I think Cat is definitely more safe right now on the New York Knicks roster than he was before he got fired. And yeah, I mean that's kind of my final thoughts there. I know that's a lot, but that's what I got.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point that you mentioned that the roster, and they want to get a head coach for this roster, like you said, and I agree with that because if they didn't, I think they would have already made it known that they were looking to shop Cat or looking to shop Bridges, things like that. I think it would have been known already if we would have known that was going to be the case. But instead, they let the head coach go, and I think that was the right decision. I even outlined that earlier in an earlier episode, actually right before Tibbs got fired. I said they need to make a decision between letting go of Tom Thibodeau or letting go of guys like Cat. And it seems like they chose Tom Thibodeau, and I personally think that was the right call, because that was the one that I was leaning towards. We always gave some of these players a bunch of crap throughout the year, but, at the same time, we got to realize that maybe they were playing the way they were because the head coach was just not a good fit for them. At the end of the day, there is no perfect head coach anymore. There just isn't. You know what I mean? Even Steve Kerr, who has won so many championships with the Warriors, has a bunch of flaws, right? So there's no perfect coach. There is none. You're never going to find that guy anymore that's like, yes, that is the A1. There's no mistakes. This is the guy who, no matter what team he goes to, they'll win. No, because at the end of the day, you have to get a guy who's going to fit with the group that you have. It isn't just about hiring the top guy because he's the top guy. No, you got to hire a guy who, yes, has a good resume, but also can, fit well with the group you have. You have a very talented group right now on the New York Knicks. I mean, that is a loaded starting five. Yes, they need more depth, but when you look at the starting five and stuff like that, it's loaded. You have 2 all-stars, you have 2 all-defense level players, and you have one of the better role players in Josh Hart, if you keep the starting five the way it is right now. That's just assuming that. And if you say switch out Josh Hart for Mitchell Robinson, then you have 3 elite defenders and 2 all-NBA level scorers. So you have a very talented starting five, one way or the other. And as you want that to be maximized right now, especially in a situation where I just mentioned the Eastern Conference is going to be wide open. The Celtics are not going to be as good next year. The Bucks are probably not going to be as good next year. And a bunch of other teams that have been contending in the Eastern Conference might not be as good. At the end of the day, the Knicks could easily finish the season as the 1 seed in the East. They very much can. I think the teams that are going to be in the running for that are going to be like the Knicks, the Pacers, the Cavaliers, and I'm going to even say the Detroit Pistons will be in the running for that. I think the Detroit Pistons will have a better season than they just did. I really do, especially with a weaker conference ahead of them. I think they could finish as the 3rd or 4th seed. But that's besides the point. This isn't about Detroit. I'm just making a point here that, the Knicks have an opportunity that they haven't had in a very long time, which is to be the best team in the NBA. And they can do that if they hire the right guy for the head coach and if they, maximize this group of talent that they have. Because I know these guys are really good players. We have watched all these guys play basketball before they came to the Knicks. This wasn't our first time watching Mikal Bridges or watching Karl-Anthony Towns. Yes, it was the first time we watched them for all 82 games, but it wasn't the first time we ever saw them play ball. So we know how they are. We know these guys are talented. We know that they can really do something, and I firmly believe that this team can win. And I think at the end of the day, it just matters about who they hire as a head coach. I think Jason Kidd would be a very strong option. I don't think he's number 1 on my list. I think Johnny Bryant is still number 1. But at the same time, it's kind of becoming 1A, 1B a little bit now because it doesn't seem like that they're as interested in Johnny Bryant as like we are. We always talk about Johnny Bryant, but I haven't heard like the Knicks mention Johnny Bryant once. So maybe they're not as interested in him anymore. Maybe that's all just Knicks Twitter speculation saying bring him back, make him the head coach, which I don't think would be a bad thing. I do think he could be a good head coach in the NBA, but if that's not what the Knicks are trying to do, if they want to get someone who is experienced already, whether in the NBA or the college level, I think Jason Kidd would be the one to go after. I don't think they should go after like, Chris Finch. And I don't think they should go after the guys that have been fired already, such as like Mike Brown or Michael Malone. I don't think they should do that. I think what they should do is go after Jason Kidd. I think he would be a solid fit, and that's really all I got to say. I do think this is a good spot to wrap the episode up, though. We're 25 minutes in, and I think this is a good spot. We don't know what's going to happen with Jason Kidd. We don't know if the Knicks are going to end up interviewing him or not. Obviously, whenever that stuff happens, we will be right here to cover that for you guys. We really hope you guys did enjoy this episode, though, and we would love to hear what you guys think about Jason Kidd and whether or not you think he'd be a good NBA head coach for the Knicks. Let us know about that in the comment section below, because we would love to talk to you guys about that. You can also follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and of course this YouTube page that you were watching the video on. You can follow me and Ryan's personal Twitter accounts. They're above our heads, and you can also check out the audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating on those, and we will see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out, and let's go Knicks.